Welcome and thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us today. For those of you who are new to our programming, we've given our writers a topic to consider and present to you today. To learn more about this year's cohort, visit iwp.uiowa.edu, where you can find biographies and writing samples from our writers and a schedule of our upcoming events. There's also pizza, graciously provided by International Programs. And our topic for today's panel is the inner world of a writer. How does a writer's personal identity shape their written work? What do they choose to include, and what is left unsaid? These essays explore the significance of a writer's identity in their work, as well as their audience's interpretation of it. And our format will change a little bit today, so I will introduce the writers right before they are set to read their essay, and I hope that as you are reading and following along, you will formulate some questions in your brain to ask at the end of the presentations. And Lindsay will be wandering around with the microphone, so if you have a question, please don't begin to ask your question until she has reached you with the microphone. So, immediately to my left is Yu Yuan Lan, fiction writer, poet, nonfiction writer from Hong Kong. She is the author of the novel Before I from 2023, the poetry collection Nowhere Land from 2022, and the short story collection The Bestiary from 2018. In recent years, she also served as a judge for the Hong Kong Youth Literary Awards in the fiction category. Her work, The Bestiary, was nominated for the Renaissance Award in 2019 for the literature category. Before I is her recent novel, attempting to break through her personal writing patterns and challenge existing local novel conventions in both form and content. She is currently a freelance journalist, writing feature articles and interviews for cultural magazines and online media, and her participation is made possible by the Robert H. N. Ho Family Foundation Global. Please welcome Yu Yuan Lan.
Hello, thanks for coming today. And today, my topic is Mirror of Inner World. In Cantonese, it's called Tâm Trạng Chi Gang. Every time I hear about our IWP writers share on different topics, they inevitably mention the inner world. The inner world is the core of a writer, the origin of all writing. This topic is vast and intangible, leading me to think of many abstract concepts. For instance, is writing the clamor of countless voices, or is it the heart gradually entering a stage of calm articulations? Sometimes it's the former, sometimes the latter. Those who love and devote themselves to writing are fortunate and gifted. As multiple dimensions of space and time open up towards them, with doors behind doors, the world is not just the solid, hopeless, singular reality before our eyes. Everything is simultaneously dissolving, coming into being and being created. Writing is the act of one person creating a world, pouring various emotions into it and summoning others. It must stem from an instant of fervent love, an instant of feeling suffering. In other words, human instinct. Since childhood, writing has been a private act for me. I even deliberately made it cryptic, like a code, difficult to understand and read. When I started to write, I didn't submit my work, participate in competition, or hope for readers. I only wanted to preserve a bit of pure selfish joy During that time, when Sanger and blogs were popular, I opened numerous writing platforms anonymously, without content information. Later, they were all lost because I forgot the passwords and login names. Imagine a place in the world where fragments of thoughts, ideas, stories, and poems linger. Meanwhile, numberless stories are waiting to be told. They still exist in the royal vault, and it doesn't matter who their creator was. I've never dreamed of changing the world through writing. I only want to understand the world, the enigma of being human, the incomprehensible parts, and to repeatedly reshape vivid perception of the world. Writing and creating must be a form of existence I've experienced through many lifetimes, a form that transcends the present moment. At 20, I conducted a writing experiment with a method novel flavor. The main character, she, crossed the boundaries of the story, which were also the boundaries of language, boundaries of imagination. On the other side, she thought she found her missing father, as well as the greater mystery of her fate as a character in the story. Or more accurately, she was following her father, not seeking him. Or even more precisely, as the author, I didn't know what she was searching for. She was simply in the story, trying to cross its boundaries. The story stopped abruptly at the boundary, unable to take another step forward. Beyond that line was only silence. Language couldn't bring anything back. Perhaps in that moment, one must abandon language. This made me think for the first time about the relationship between language and silence, the infinite possibility of writing and its limits. The world of writing has an infinite expansiveness, allowing you to experience hopeless, and entire shadowed spiritual realm. Your desires are endless. I believe this is something most writers have felt. Through writing, you try to get as close as possible to the inner world that coexists with you. Or perhaps the opposite. A large part of your inner world is brought back to life through your writing. Some writers, early on, tied a thread to a real world, safely balancing their multiple shelves. They write diligently about the suffering and unseen others in the world. They write about forgetting, resistance, and witnessing precious, irreplaceable memories. Some writers document their homeland, their people, or cultures and history that gradually disappearing. As for me, to be honest, I write for selfish reasons. Thus, I've become a certain kind of writer, repeatedly getting lost in the inner world of mind and spirit, returning, getting lost again, and returning once more. In writing, I repeatedly revisit certain childhood scenes, dreams, and unresolved fragments, pondering when certain traumas or regrets took shape, reflecting on the struggles and compromises in intimate relationship, contemplating the dark sides and hopes of being human. I believe many people's childhoods include unique symbolic experiences that influence their future creation and lives. Often without their awareness, I grew up in a border town between China and Hong Kong called Sa Tao Gok. My primary school was on the British side. From a young age, we used different documents to cross between the Chinese and British sides, always guarded by police and on both ends. My father, when I was young, swam across to Hong Kong as a stowaway. During that journey, he saw dead bodies suffocated in the hold of merchant ship and heard a bodies drowned in the sea during smuggling attempts. I am grateful that my father didn't die. Borders are intangible and ambiguous, a part of my childhood. Yet, there are always real and brutal lines drawn across our bodies, identity, nationalities, and existence, forming politics. Later, my family moved to Hong Kong to live. In Hong Kong, you consistently feel urgency and necessity of that border, followed by its gradual fading and disappearance. A significant part of Hong Kong's history stems from the division and ambiguity of this border. Now, this border faces erasure. Identity, language, culture, and history will vanish and transform with it. Over the past decade, Hong Kong has experienced several social movements. Since 2019, the fate of many Hong Kongers has been profoundly shaken. Their life trajectory completely altered. In the face of disaster, suffering, the injustice, debates about the utility or fertility of writing resurface repeatedly. Sometimes you cannot bear to use real suffering, disillusionment, woods, exiled, or imprisonment as materials for writing, especially events are still unfolding, their outcomes uncertain. Sometimes you feel powerless and useless in writing, even unable to bear it. Massive collective trauma eventually lead to a loss of words. You can no longer hold onto your previous literary views and continue writing. I've even wondered if it is better not to write at all, or if religion might offer another answer. A loss of word signifies a transition between old and language and beliefs. Sometimes you don't know how long this transition will last. Many Hong Kong writers face the similar situation, grappling with an inability to write or a loss of words. Reorienting their creative directions. During this time, Hong Kong writers must confront unprecedented censorship and restrictions, an unclear red line and forbidden zone, along with a terrifying and reporting hotline. This isn't solely from the regimes. It also stems from the disrupt and mutual criticism and surveillance among people, as well as self-censorship by institutions with power or resources in various sectors, interfering with and canceling creative work. I want to tell you about a few things. One novelist who is one of IWP writers participated in Iowa residency in 2010, Han Laiju, recently published a novel candidly addressing events in Hong Kong over the past few years. She chose not to hold a book launch or accept interviews in Hong Kong. Another poet who joined Iowa residency in 2018, Zhao Hongfei, had his poetry collection win the 2022 Hong Kong Biennial Award for Chinese Literature, but the award was cancelled due to the sensitive nature of the content. His book was removed from Hong Kong Public Library. Another 2019 IWP participant, playwright Zhong Muingam, has faced multiple cancellations in recent years, including being barred from appearing as the playwright of stage production at her school, APA. A video interview planned for APA's 14th anniversary was deleted, possibly because it couldn't be uploaded to Xiaohongshu. And over the past few years, her works has been censored or banned from public performances, etc. These are real, absurd events faced by writers, poets, and playwrights in Hong Kong, and these are just examples of those who attended IWP residency. There are many more. This is a systemic decay and transformation so vast. Fear, anxiety, and trauma spread through every individual, unexpectedly shaking an entire generation of Hong Kongers. As one of them, in writing, you experience a loss of words, seek a new distance for writing, oriented language and subject matter, and face a new normal of censorship. This brief, unforeseen period will permanently become part of your inner world, accompanying your future writing. In this era, how you speak, how you write, and why you write become profoundly important questions. Yet you never write for a definitive answer. Whether there's an answer or not, you keep writing. Now, when writing, you know certain words and events cannot be written directly, and you must adopt a more subtle, cautious approach. How do you stay clear-headed, preserving honesty and voice? This must be experienced and experimented with by our generation. Writing the words of this era. In writing, recurring quotes, scenes, or observation are a form of collective scars, as there must also be parts filled with hope and anticipation of the future. Indeed, it is deeply collective. I am in you and you are in me. Writing is inevitably a process of connection, coexistence, mutual witnessing, and arriving at the answer of what it means to be human. I believe that in the next 10, 20, or 30 years, Hong Kong will give rise to more distinct and unique words. I believe the inner world of a writer is so mysterious, free, and boundless. People have an instinct to speak and connect, which cannot be suppressed by the power establishment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lan Lan. I think there's a lot to be said about your essay, so thank you. Our next presenter is Tay Tibble, who is a poet, nonfiction writer from Aotearoa, which we also know as New Zealand. She is the author of 2 poetry collections, Rangikura from 2024 and Pocahontas from 2022. She won the Best First Book of Poetry Award at the 2019 Occam New Zealand Book Awards and is the 2024 winner of the Poetry Foundation's Bess Hoskin Prize. She is currently working on a discontinuous novel and poetry collection about the ocean, and her participation is made possible by a grant from Creative New Zealand. Please welcome Tay.
Thank you, Lita. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko hukirangi mi whitamataro te maunga, ko waiapu me awatiri te awa, ko Ngāti Pro me te whānau apanui o te iwi, ko te whanganui a tara ahau ko teitapu toko ingoa, ka mihi o te mana whenua o tēnei whenua, Meshkwaki Nation. Just want to acknowledge especially the custodians of this land, especially at this time of what's going on outside, and I just want to assert that these lands we're on, like, they don't belong to our governments nor the violence that they use to enforce their claim. They belong to he tangata, la raza, the people, and I will and I wish for the day when Indigenous people have land back and Indigenous knowledge is centred, because I find that when you centre Indigenous knowledge and indigeneity, people will be surprised how everyone has a place and how everyone is welcomed. Tihei mauri ora. All right, now on to my sleaze. Because I identify as Indigenous, one of the first things I wanted to do upon arriving in Iowa City was introduce myself to the Mississippi River. Before I could do so, however, I was stopped by a young man who identified me as attractive, but then asked me if I was a goth. I'm often mistaken for other things when I travel to other parts of the world, but usually I'm mistaken for an Australian or a mamacita. The goth comment confused me because in my mind, my urban bohemian spirit exercises itself via an urban bohemian style. Having identified me as potentially goth, but definitely foreign, he asked me what I was doing here in Iowa City. I explained that I was here on a writer's residency, and when that explained nothing, I gave details. 20 foreign writers descend on Iowa City to wax and write and discuss important literary issues such as identity. What do you identify as, he asked. Māori, I said instinctively, proudly, and I explained that Māori are the Indigenous people of New Zealand. What do you identify with besides Māori, he asked, and I started buffering. My brain hurt as I tried to form a reply. All I truly identified with in that moment was jet lag. All I could come up with was Polynesian, which is essentially the same thing. Who am I? Because I was in a vulnerable state, his play for my number triggered something of an identity crisis in me. I got out of there, and then I went to the river and told the Mississippi about my own awa tere, how its clear waters cut through the lands of my ancestors, but then I realized that my most precious memory of the river is not even mine, but my great-grandmother's, who saw a taniwha, a water spirit, run from the river and into the forest. So much of my identity, my internal world, and my writing has been formed by others, by the lives and beliefs and memories of my ancestors. In Te Ao Māori, the Māori world, whakapapa, meaning ancestry and genealogy, is the backbone of our culture. The spine of our whare nui, our meeting houses, are carved with intricate stories that define the people that we are. We trace ourselves back to the first canoes we arrived on, or even further back to the mountains and rivers and to Papatuanuku herself. We self-describe as tangata whenua, meaning not quite people of the land, but people, land, synonymous. This is our identity. But if the land is intrinsic to who we are, I have often wondered what happens to a person or a people when that land has been stolen. As a colonized people, to identify with the land is also to identify with loss. And while I feel my river inside me and I invoke my tribal lands whenever I can, whenever I get the opportunity to speak, I name them. At the same time, I did not grow up seeing taniwha in the river or sleeping beneath the breast of our mountain, Whitumataro, as my grandmother did. In the 1950s, my grandmother, Harata Te Waiho Karaka, took a new name, Charlotte Clark, and moved to Wellington City to find work, as many Māori did at the time, unable to sustain themselves in a growing world on shrinking lands. Her decision to leave the coast for the city changed the trajectory and the identity of my family indefinitely, fitting of her name, Te Waiho, meaning a new split in the river. As a child in the city during the 2000s, I did not want to identify as Māori. No one did. To be Māori in the city was synonymous with being lazy, drunk, violent, and dependent on government handouts. Our language was dying and irrelevant, our stories naive and rudimentary. In 2004, when I was 9 years old, I watched Māori unite as we marched on Parliament to seek protection of our foreshore and seabed, while simultaneously I watched the Prime Minister describe us as haters and wreckers. Our skin, the colour of dirt, was seen as dirty and not expressive of our connection to the whenua, to the lands from which we were raised, ever since Tānei Mahuta, the god of the forest, shaped the first woman out of red clay. Kids would not play with me, expressing openly that I wasn't the right colour. I learnt very young to feel othered, even though this land was supposed to be our whenua. When I would go back to my tribal lands as a child, mostly for funerals, I felt not othered, but a certain friction between the person I was and the person I was supposed to be. The stories spoken in te reo Māori distorted in my ears. The waiata, songs, dances and customs I should have known fluently, I could only make a clumsy copy. My cousins would eye my sneakers, my clothes and comment, "Who does this flesh guy think she is?" Which confused me because at school I'd get called pōhara, like poor. But of course, eventually my cousins and I would warm to each other and become, for that week, inseparable. After all, we shared the same blood in our veins, the same river. In the city, it wasn't as if we weren't raised Māori, we were, but in a different way. Instead of singing our stories at dawn in the wharenui, we sang them over guitars and six-packs and hip-hop beats in the garage. My favourite photo of my mother was taken at her school ball. She wore a Polynesian tapa cloth sewn into a bustier onto a black satin gown. I was born a year later, and even the name I was given, Te, not Māori, not English, but a third thing, an invented thing, was an expression of 90s urbanism, modern Māoritanga, a new split in the river. I always wanted to be a writer, and largely this was influenced by growing up in the lap of my great-grandmother and listening to the stories of her childhood, of our tribal lands and our ancestors, which imbued me with my sense of poetics, a sense of music, reverence, and a love for te taiao, our environment. But I never wrote about my identity or my Māoritanga until I was in graduate school. Very early on, during my MA, I wrote Pocahontas, which would go on to be the titular poem of my first book. In that poem, I wrote about my identity as an Indigenous woman, via hair. I wrote about my grandmother and my sister, but also Medusa, Cleopatra, Pocahontas, and Nicole Scherzinger from the Pussycat Dolls. On the page, I realized I could bring seemingly disparate parts of myself together. Sometimes I realized that those parts were actually harmonious or complementary. Other times, I realized that tension didn't necessarily have to be only uncomfortable. Instead, it could be exciting, bringing energy and a point of difference to the page. I ended up writing my entire first book about my heritage, my mother, my nana, my great-grandmother, and myself. I wrote about our experiences, mostly of racism, but also of our loves and interests and passions combined. I wrote about Bowie, Hendrix, Warhol, but also Aaliyah, Rihanna, and Kim Kardashian. At least during the writing process, my story and my identity were mine to define, and no one, not even the Prime Minister, got to dictate what I was or what I wasn't. I could rewrite the narratives a colonized society had imposed on me, and in the process, I learned to appreciate my inheritance, my whakapapa, for what is poetry but an exercise in close attention, which in turn is an act of love. Kaitahu Māori author Tina Makarete talks about writing happening in one room while publishing happens in another. In the writing room, you should express yourself freely, but when you publish, you must consider how your words might affect others. In Te Ao Māori, we are raised to understand that our individual identity is not as important as our collective one, but at the same time, Māori are not monolithic. Our identities are shaped differently, just as our landscapes and histories differentiate. But I recognize that after years of having our stories either stolen, destroyed, or told by our oppressor, the hunger for our stories and our own representation is real. Because landlessness causes hunger, which in part can cause a kind of cannibalism, one that, yes, some of us do inherit from our ancestors, myself included, a ruthless streak that can make us eat our own. My portrayal of the urban Māori has on occasion inspired criticism. I've been accused of bastardizing the Māori language, for example, or commercializing, even sexualizing my indigeneity. And while my first and honest response is turi turi tawaha, shut up, criticism is to be expected. Not only is Māori opinion diverse, but it is true that we were once a warrior race. And as much as we value kotahitanga, unity, I have never met a Māori who didn't genuinely enjoy fighting. When I told my mother about some of the criticism, my mother raised her eyebrow and said, well, who died and made them rangatira, chief? She reminded me that I belonged to my whānau, family, and my tribe first. And just like my grandmother, Harata, who left her ancestral lands to make a new story for herself, I too have the right to create something new. Still, it is good to check your orientation every now and then and adjust your sails if necessary. In my poem, aptly titled Identity Politics, I repeat the refrain, am I navigating correctly? This was a direct question and prayer to my ancestors for guidance, specifically the open ocean voyagers who navigated the mightiest ocean on Earth by listening to the environment and mapping the stars. When I wrote that poem, I was scared. I had an understanding that a book could be a waka, canoe, carrying our ancestors across oceans and through time, from past, present to future. Could the waka of words I built withstand? Could I steer it? Am I navigating correctly? This is something I still ask myself every time I sit down to write. And despite a few raru issues like bad weather, in honesty, since I started my haerenga te hā writing journey, I have faced little resistance. My tupuna ancestors consistently send me signs, he tohu, that I am on the correct path, and given me, in our words, the gift of travel, allowing us to cross oceans, to speak to you today, and see the far side of the Pacific and beyond, just like they did. The response to my writing has instilled a confidence in me, a deeper grounding in my identity and purpose in Te Ao. Instead of, am I navigating correctly? In my second book, Rangikura, I repeat, my ancestors ride with me. Just as I trust their guidance, they trust where I am taking them to. To be Māori is to be tangata whenua, people of the land, but to be Polynesian is to be tangata moana, people of the ocean. The ocean is a symbol of travel, of fluidity, change, and adaptation. Just like my grandmother left the East Coast, our ancestors left behind whole islands they loved in order to discover Aotearoa and make a new identity for themselves as Māori. At the same time, there is a saying that echoes throughout the Pacific. E kore au I ngaro he kakono I ruia mai I rangiatia. Even scattered on the wind, one can never be lost, for you are a seed grown in rangiatia. Identity can be expansive and as fluid as the ocean, but the ocean still unites us and connects us to our past and our essentialisms. When I write with all my identities, taking many seeds from rainy winds to grow a colourful garden. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you very much, Tay. Before I introduce our final presenter, I do want to mention some upcoming events, which I hope to see you all at. On Sunday at 4 p.m., we will have our Prairie Lights reading featuring Vlora Konushevtsev from Kosovo, Dongolera C. Mwangupili from Malawi, and fiction MFA candidate Mauricio Ruiz. I'd also like to share a quick note that our writers will be traveling next week, and there will not be a library panel next Friday. So you can continue to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at UIIWP for additional event updates. So our final presenter is Dongolera C. Mwangupili, who will be reading on Sunday, who is a poet, fiction writer, scholar, and culturalist from Malawi. He is the author of Fragments of My Broken Voice, a poetry book, Sons of the Hills, a novel that is in the secondary school curriculum in Malawi, and A Gift to the People, Sir Beatrice Chipeta's Legacy, a biography. His works also appear in Southern Humanities Review and florilege. Others have been widely anthologized, including the Kane Prize for African Writing in 2024, Midnight in the Morgue, and other stories. Dongoleta is currently working on a novel set to reflect on the social reality in his country, and his participation is made possible thanks to the generous support of Hugh F. Culverhouse Jr. and other donations made to the International Writing Program. Please welcome Dongoleta.
Thank you very much. My presentation is titled The Inner World of a Writer, Literature reflecting the writer. The inner world of a writer. I attest to a personal datum that what a writer is shapes what he writes. I come from Malawi, a little-known country in southern Africa. Malawi is one of the least developed countries, one of the 10 poorest countries in the world. Thus, my country is my wider society. But I also do have other small societies, my impoverished home village along Lake Malawi called Mwanjavara, and also where I live, Muzuzu City. My day-to-day work that brings food on my table makes me intensively travel far and wide within my country. I have been born and bred in Malawi. That has made me who I am as a person and what I believe in. The way I think, talk, act, and indeed write emanates from who I am, a Malawian. My inspiration as a writer is my environment, social culture. For me, I have a defined writing philosophy. I'm inspired by the social reality, portraying the reality of my society, its challenges and predicaments. I believe I write to enlighten my society, to liberate my people. My serious thoughts are meant to challenge people to think differently from what is considered normal. I am part of that society. I am part of its challenges. I am because of what the society is. It defines me. My writing, as it reflects my society, it also mirrors me. I am identified by it. I think as a Malawian, I write as a Malawian, and I act as a Malawian. As long as I accept that my personality is formed by being a Malawian, I am part of the cause, the problem, and the solution of what Malawi is. Thus, this philosophy drives my writing, and it makes me find my unique voice to write passionately and differently from other writers. My novel, Sons of the Hills, is based on the Uraha mythology, surrounding some hills in my home district, where people believe the top of one of the hills is soft and thrums like a fontanelle of a baby's head. Twins were forbidden to climb those hills. These are geological phenomena rather than necessarily mythological, but you know how the local people believe. Some archaeological discoveries have been unveiled around those hills and in many other parts of my home district. So my characters in this novel, the twins, are put in this local setting, one becoming an academician and the other a military officer. The story goes to depict the social-cultural situation of an African country, tackling all aspects of a society. Ultimately, it's a story that reflects my country, my people, and its challenges. I am in it as one of the people who laughs, cries, and dies in those challenges. My poems, the collection Fragments of My Broken Voice, is a voice of my people, me crying, laughing, and shouting with them. You cannot separate my identity from it. I sometimes wonder whether the persona in all those poems is not me as a poet. Anyhow, there could be my sisters, my brothers, my uncles, my villagers, my playmates, and of course, my drinking buddies. Poems are songs, and the singer puts his emotions in them. This is why in the poet's notes of that collection, I say, when you live among a people who lack basic needs, your voice is broken. It is broken because of crying day in and day out. However, in those crying intervals, there are also intervals of laughters and jokes. The famished people have time for love. They bear children who bring joy among them. That is the iron of life. I'm into writing my second novel. I'm working on it right here in Iowa. This is fully set in my village, Mwanjawara. As I write, I see myself in the main character, and I see several other boys and young men from my village in him. The poverty, the violence, traditions, ritualism, and witchcraft, all reflected in it. It is a reflection of my identity and the wider community of Malawi. That is why I decided to title it I Am Who I Am. Can I write about America? Possibly yes, but I'll be writing as an African, and a Malawian in particular. Will I be a good writer if I choose to write about what I am not? I doubt. But writing about my home, my village, and my people, I feel at home, I feel the story, and I'm in it as a character. And my voice is the voice of the people I know. I will ask the same question. Can an American write about Africa? Possibly yes, but cannot write as an African. That one will have an American voice and write as an American. There are several such books and also media stories written about, by non-Africans with a voice which is not African. Hearts of Darkness is a good example, and definitely media houses like CNN and BBC. In a story or a poem, the voice tells us who is narrating the story. This is not necessarily the author. The author attempts to give that to an anonymous narrator. Most of us do this unknowingly, and that is why it is easy to associate the voice with who the author is or what influences the author. But there are writers who seriously consider the voice in their narratives. I seriously think about the voice in my stories and poems. That builds my style, and you can easily discover it in my writing. The voice informs me in my choice of words and style, and essentially what I write about. I should be honest. I've never written a story or a poem that has not been heavily inspired by a true occurrence, my personal experience, or something I saw or read about. I have struggled to categorize my stories as true stories or fiction. I see a thin line between facts and fictions in my stories and poems. Am I a creative nonfiction writer or a fiction writer? Of course, I'm a fiction writer. I am a fiction writer as I change a lot of things. Facts and fictions get fused in a confused way. I own the wording and style. I leave it to the readers to discover me in my writing. But if you want to go into the mind of Africa, particularly in Malawi, I call you to read what I write. I take you on a ride into my people, my culture, my history, and what made me grow to what I am now. Let me leave you with one last question. Can we truly separate writing from the writer? My position as a writer is that it is an impossible possibility. Creation is a reflection of the creator. A part of me, my thoughts and feelings will always be in what I write. Those are my three thoughts.
Thank you, Don Valera. We have time for silly thoughts to be presented to the writers. So Lindsay is ready with the microphone if there are any questions for any of our presenters or all three of them.
Thank you all for this very enlightening panel. I wanted to, is it on? Okay, it's not on, right? I wanted to ask you three about the relationship with faith in your writing and how maybe spiritual practices guide how you access the inner world, especially what I know about Lan Lan and Dongo in particular, about how spiritual beliefs bleed into your daily life, if you're comfortable talking about it.
All right.
Yes.
I can start. I honestly confess that I'm a Catholic, a very faithful Catholic, that I wanted to be a priest, and then I changed and became a teacher. I say I am a teacher, which is just different from a preacher, just a different of T and PR. However, I also very much support my tribe with cultural beliefs and all that, and also try to enlighten them in terms of the difference from that. I am also a Secretary General of my heritage group in my tribe. So it's a bit conflicting. Sometimes you may think you are practicing religious syncretism, where you think you are a Christian as well as you are also very much promoting what is cultural. However, I believe that for me, religion is what directs in terms of the philosophy behind my writing. So it's always there. It has to guide me. But at the same time, I have to weigh the two religions in me, the cultural as well as the borrowed Christianity, which all are reflected in my writing. So I accept that I'm a man of two religions, kind of.
Actually, I seriously consider to be a nun and dedicate myself to fully to the religion path. But yes, you can see now I'm still here and I'm still writing, and I didn't pick another path of religion. I still maintain my role as a writer. But I think this is quite a long dialogue between myself, and also I talk with my friend. How do we choose? Because the religion path, I think it is a ultimate path for me. And how about the writing? But I think when there is a long dialogue with myself and also with my close friend, I think I can see, I also think I can write in a way of spirituality. Like I can see each word like a bodhisattva. It means the act of compassion. And after I have this perspective, I have a totally different stand of my writing. And because I can write, and I can put my spirituality practice into my writing. And I think this kind of practice or this kind of writing will impact others. Yes. Thank you.
I've kind of lost the question in my head, but I think when people read my work, they get surprised that there's often a lot of Christianity or Christian references, and that's because, Christianity was one of the tools of colonisation, so lots of Pacific Islanders and Māori have Christian influence or believe in Christianity. I personally don't, but a lot of my family converted to Jehovah's Witnessism later in life, so I was raised a bit with that. And it doesn't resonate with me spiritually. I'm more spiritual from my Te Ao Māori side, which is more like paganism. But I still really loved a lot of the Bible stories. Like, they were really fundamental to me as a child, just those stories. And same with my Māori mythology. Those are just the stories that were the first stories that I heard and I was raised up with and I loved. But then in Te Ao Māori, our gods, we've got hundreds and hundreds of them, but they're all just metaphors for the environment. So when I write, and I write about the environment or I write about my gods, it's just like, yeah, a communion and a connection between the two. But I do have some, I don't know, I do have some atua, some gods that I have a better relationship with, I think. Like Tangaroa, the god of the sea, he's really fruitful for me in many ways. Like, he's always given me gifts when I go to the beach, and he also helps me with my writing. Yeah, he helps me be productive.
Is there another question? I think I saw a hand back there. I don't know if the question would still like to be asked. I will say I also wanted to be a nun when I was young. I don't know if they'd accept me now, but... Okay, thank you. Abu Bakr.
Since everyone seems shy to ask a question, considering that your works are really focused or tied to your identity, do you sometimes feel that as writers you're sort of anthropologizing yourself to explain your identity and your culture to the other, and in that, by that kind of ordering yourself as well? How do you kind of negotiate or navigate that divide? I hope that makes sense.
Writing this essay I did because it's kind of making it explicit, having to like really, yeah. So I did feel I was quite resistant and had a hard time writing this essay and didn't want to read it and still wish I had read it, even though it's all right. And I appreciate you all listening anyways, but it's different. In New Zealand, I don't have to like, I don't have to, when I speak to you guys, it's a bit different. I need to explain my context and where I'm from, but also I feel like I want to do that. Like I want to share about my culture. I want you guys to know and there to be that sort of translation. But at home, I don't have to as much. I don't have to do any definitions or anything like that. It's better now. I think when I started writing, there was less, especially young women, Māori women, rangatahi Māori publishing. And when I published, I was kind of the only one, and that was quite stressful, kind of having to justify or explain myself and my work to most people are just, I think most people who want to engage with writing, though, they're pretty genuine and smart and curious people. Like most of them aren't trying to be extracting or exploitative of you most of the time, but every now and then there's someone who, I don't know, has an agenda or some sort of preconceived idea about what you should be like or what you're doing. But I lost my train of thought. I think mostly it's okay, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, I take it as a mission that I really have to stand for my tribe, and particularly that my tribe is a minority in my country. We are very small, so I take it as something that I have to stand for, but I also run away from being somebody who simply wants to promote it, because I know there are also challenges. There's one challenge like witchcraft and also ritualism, which I'm not comfortable with. I also try to enlighten my community in terms of the evils and the backlashes of that. And just in addition to that, I also kind of write on this beyond simply this, even in my academic papers. So I also consider that I have to seriously research about my culture on these issues and write about them, yes.
Lan, did you want to answer the question? Or?
I don't think... Yes, Hong Kong is a place that I think a lot of people may have some impression of this city, like it is a city of capitalism, or it is colonialized by the British and then now returned to China, and most of them will understand Hong Kong from the perspective of politics or economical, or how they develop well and how their financial development. And but I think a lot of Hong Kong, I think a lot of people, they don't realize know about the cultural park or some historical part, or even though the literary part of Hong Kong. And yes, especially when we talk about the characteristics of Hong Kong, as what we mentioned, it is an immigration city, and a lot of people, they find their homeland in Hong Kong. That's why Hong Kong is a place that with a diversified culture, and but it is not easy to tell the story related to it. But I think, yes, it is one symbolic or unique characteristics of Hong Kong. Yeah, thank you.
We have time for maybe one more question, if there is one. And if not, I am curious if the three of you, or if you're so inclined to speak on it, I'm curious how you all see these conversations regarding identity, cultural, ethnic, linguistic, how you see those conversations here in the United States, where, you know, we're a very diverse country in many ways, versus in your home countries. Do you find it easier to have those conversations here in the U.S.? Do you find it more challenging to talk about your own personal identities?
Okay, maybe I can start. One challenge I have in my country is that to be associated to be another tribe. So it's easier for me. Malawi is divided into three regions. North, I come from the north, center, and south. South is, there are several tribes. In the center, there's only one tribe, and it's easier to associate all people from the center and south as Chewa, and all people from the north as Tumbuka. While in the north, there are also other small tribes, and one of my tribes, the Ngonde people, are a few. The majority are in Tanzania because we are close to Tanzania. So it's easier to say I'm Tumbuka, while I know I'm not. So it becomes a challenge to start explaining within my country now that I'm not Tumbuka, I'm this, and this is the difference, and that is the other way of looking at it. So it becomes a huge challenge within to understand the diversity of the nation. And on 1st November, actually, unfortunately, I'll be traveling. We have our cultural festival. We have the theme which you say unity in diversity. Why? It's because we're trying to say we should understand that we're diverse as a country, while we should also portray that we are one. We chose that theme because of the same idea that we should accept that there are small tribes within which have to be respected and allowed to exist, even their language, because our language is dying, because it's small. And then while also promoting the unity of the whole country. So sometimes when you promote very much a small tribe, you are considered to be more like a rebel of the whole country. So sometimes it's easier to talk about those somewhere else. Maybe in books where you say it's a novel, it's a story, it's not me. But in the end, we need a lot of dialogue within the country for these things to be accepted.
I think if you had asked me, if I was here a year ago and you had asked me this question, I would have probably argued that there was a difference and said that Aotearoa is kind of a more, at least the way we perceive America via the media, that New Zealand was a bit more of a progressive country and a bit more tolerant of diversity and conversations around diversity, especially freedom of speech. But just within a year, just like how America, I think, has had a troubling year in terms of politics and what people can and can say, New Zealand's really gone down the same sort of path. We have a new government, a coalition government that contains a really right-wing party, and there's been lots of assaults on freedom of speech and Indigenous rights. So I don't think there's too much of a difference. I think culturally and politically now we're quite similar to America, and historically we're similar to America too, as a colonised country, Western colonised country. So I think the ability to have these conversations is getting more difficult, but they're more necessary.
Yes, actually, nowadays, as a Hong Kong writer, and they have to face the loss of freedom or some pressure from censorship. Even though I prepared this article, and I still thinking about will it bring any consequence, and especially this is a recorded, it will record it and then put it into the YouTube. And I'm also worried about it, even though I think my articles not talking too much about something anti to national security law, but I still have that kind of fear. But I think it's it is also the difficulty and the challenge for the Hong Kong writers nowadays, and you can see a lot of Hong Kong writers, they just immigrant to different countries, and they because they want to remain their freedom of writing, and some of them publish their novels and works in Taiwan. But I think the writers who are still staying in Hong Kong, and they have think about their writing strategy and approach to face this situation. Yes. And I'm happy that I can read this article today here, but because in Hong Kong, I won't do this way. And yes, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you all.